and welcome to another episode of Play by Pod, the sports podcast that is changing the game of sports broadcasting right across Australia by sharing the stories of emerging, rising and established broadcast personalities across the country, across all levels of sport, to help provide valuable insights in particular areas and perhaps share a thing or two about commentary in the sports space. As we gear up for another big episode, we're taking a little bit of a twist for this edition, where yours truly, Chris Yeend, is just going to be riding solo, and the show is being dictated by you from the Play by Pod broadcast family. So across the socials and numerous platforms, I put it out to you guys over recent weeks of some questions that you'd like answered, not just from me, but also questions that I can feed through to some of our guests in the future. So this particular show, I'm going to answer those questions, provide a little bit of light from my broadcast experience, and then over coming episodes, I'm going to feed those questions into some of our esteemed guests and get some of their expertise and just some of their experience of it. Because realistically, when it comes to the broadcast space, we do learn from experience and learn from those around us. So it's I think it's a very evolving wheel that we tend to find ourselves in as we look to grow and improve as broadcasters, whichever platform you may be on, whether it's you're calling sport at local level, regional level, state level, national level, or international level. The common thing that I sort of find with broadcasters is that you just never stop learning, and that's fantastic. Even those who've been broadcasting 20 years may find it difficult to go back and listen to some of their work from 12 months earlier, because let's be honest, the way that the broadcast space is changing, whether it's on radio or national TV or streaming services or digital platforms where you might have YouTube and other avenues like that, other agencies, there's just so many opportunities and so many different techniques that are coming in, and it's a perfect one. So today, the show is being built by you guys, so I appreciate those that reached out over various posts, checked in on the email. I'm going to run through some of those questions for you for this particular episode. Hopefully you can learn a thing or two and get you all fired up for future broadcasting opportunities and a bit more of an insight into how some things unfold. So just a little bit about my experience for those who are first-time listeners, long-time callers, or was it the other way around? I'm not sure. Anyway, I first started calling in the Riddle District Football Netball League in Victoria, country Victoria, about 60 minutes north of Melbourne, back in 2009, doing some trial runs with community radio station 100.7 Highlands FM. I was thrilled to be part of the first ever broadcast of the RDFNL that continues to this very day, thanks to some great mates down in Vic, the likes of Gav and Turns and a few of the other stars down there have continued to push the boundaries on the RDFNL socials and call some of the big games over there. So as a footy fan, AFL fan now living in Queensland, I'm thrilled to see that continue and some of the other codes down there starting to evolve in that. So that's kind of where I started from. I was there from the very first one, Wood End Heskett playing away to Macedon at Tony Clark Reserve. I was one of the head trainers at the Wood End Heskett Football Netball Club. For those who are watching on the video, you can see the scarf there. And I did the training duties for the under 18 halves, I think, back then, and then suited up and was part of the first ever call, which was on the old telephone line too, which and sort of enforced a bit of delay. So we were kind of limited at the time on where we could broadcast, because some clubs relied on the phone line to do FPOS. So that was back in 2009, and how things have changed because we've come to use internet. We did have, I think, maybe the 5 to 7 second delay, so it made it very challenging to broadcast at the grounds when we first started out, until we found other avenues with the aid of a small transmitter that was able to send a feed directly from our mixer to the little transmitter and circle it around the ground within a 2-kilometer radius. So that was pretty cool. It's we've come a long way since then. Over that time, I got involved in some Ballarat Footy Netball League calls, and then upon moving to Queensland, I saddled up and moved into the AFL Queensland space calling women's footy. Then that emerged into the men's footy. Then that translated to the VFL, AFL, and AFLW, and numerous academy games and development games across the journey as well. And thinking of 2023, some pretty cool stuff, some cool games was getting involved in the multicultural program for AFL over at Carrara, calling some of the best junior talent with parents of players with parents who either come from an Indigenous background or come from overseas. So that was pretty cool. Some great talent there. And then capped off with some other thrilling games too. So I think you never really get sick of that. It's pretty exciting. And on top of that too, I will say just personally as a broadcaster, it's pretty one of the coolest things I got to do was be a part of the International Cup back in 2017. I think there might have been another one too. Having a couple of countries come from overseas. I think we have Philippines, China, a few of the others sort of escape me at the moment. But to call those games and have that put on a broader scale and pumping that back to the countries back home, that was really cool. That's a wonderful experience. France was one of them as well. I think I remember doing, it might have been France and the Philippines, and France were very well solidly built players, and the Philippines were very short and very exciting players. I remember getting really excited for a shot on goal from the Philippines, and hit the post. And if they had gone through, it would have been their only goal of the game. But the whole crowd just got really excited for that. And that was a curtain raiser to the senior game that we were calling that day too. Other things that I've sort of been involved in, just sharing, love sharing a few stories because, again, it's I love to take the time to reflect, and I think we all should as broadcasters take the time to reflect on some of the awesome moments that we had the privilege of putting the headset on. I had the opportunity to call games for the University Basketball League around the country, so I got to see some awesome superstars there. I had to call some national and international games for Squash Australia in my time there, which is really awesome. Probably one of the career highlights, just in terms of how big it meant. I was calling a national junior championship game. I think it might have been under 11s, under 12s. And we had a young guy called Harry, and his whole school, a little country town in New South Wales, they all gathered in front of the big screen and they watched the great man play and ended up winning this particular game. So they took the time out of their day because the championship took place during school time, and that was awesome. As a sports fan, someone got really excited, not really accustomed to the squash commentary culture, to just get genuinely excited about two young stars going toe to toe, and young Henry, it is Henry, winning an incredible game, and hearing all the feedback from his school. A lot of them probably hadn't played squash before, let's be honest, but they were all getting very excited for him. So that feedback sort of came through, and yeah, I don't think you don't stop getting excited about those things. I just don't think you do. And then in 2023, I had the opportunity to call some NBL 1, which was wonderful, and also getting involved in the Australian National Junior Championships and the Australian National High School Championships, both in the basketball space. So for those Brisbane Bullets fans, we've got a young 17-year-old by the name of Rocco. I'm not going to hesitate to pronounce his name, but he's 7'2". He's an absolute giant. 17-year-old. He's tipped to go round 1, I think. It might be 18. Anyway, he's tipped to go round 1 in the NBA draft in a couple of years' time. But I had the privilege of calling him at the schools in 2022 on the Gold Coast, and then followed up with the under 21 national championships, which is effectively what ended up being the under 18s for Queensland. Called him in a couple of games there, and especially the bronze medal game too. So you kind of get excited about those things. I've only had a small taste of basketball, but it's sort of been pretty exciting to see that you've been able to call a player that is tipped to go very high in the draft order in the NBA. So, which in itself, you think the big picture, and as I spoke about with Liam in the last episode of the show, Liam Allison, who's doing wonderful things in the basketball space, you're calling stars that are going to be playing NBA, or calling stars that are looking to come from America to prepare themselves for the NBA by playing NBL. Doesn't get much better than that. So that's a little bit about my background, and also as part of the thrill of it, I love being able to coach and help work with some aspiring callers. So if you are interested, if there's anything I can do to help you out, just jump on the Play by Pod socials, and yeah, I'd love to have a chat with you and see if there's anything I can do to help you out. Because one of the things I kind of do additionally is I sit on the desk for SEN, the Sports Entertainment Network, and I work with some of the best callers in the country across all sports: tennis, basketball, soccer, AFL, rugby league, and there's probably a few more others as well. And so one of the things I get to do is I get to do some producing, but I also get to make the highlights, and I also get to give directions on just how sometimes the show unfolds. But most importantly is I spend much of the time watching the audio, watching for those inflections of tone, watching for the rises that we get for the big moments. And there's some of the best in the country. So I have the TV on in the background, but I spend most of the time, and it's bizarre. If you've been in the industry, I spend pretty much the entire call just watching the audio waves, whether they're going, very up and down phonetically, or rising low and then going up high. So that's, I actively listen to commentary. So that's probably why I like to see if I can provide some assistance, and being a key foundation to this podcast as well is that I've got some experience personally, and I'm connected with a number of wonderful broadcasters around the country. And courtesy of this show, the podcast, I'm continuing to connect with callers right around the country. And I've got some awesome ones coming up in the future that I haven't personally met before, but we've reached out to each other, and they've expressed their interest in getting involved. And happy days. Before I get on to the questions today, I want to give a big shout out to the great man, Peter Holden from Wharf Radio. Pete has been a wonderful ambassador for women's football in the AFLW space across season 8 of the AFLW, giving myself and countless others around the country the opportunity to broadcast AFL football on digital radio via the AFL website, and giving us the chance to be involved in press conferences, interview players, and just have the opportunity to call the evolution, be part of the evolution of AFLW. And the benefit, I guess, of being in Queensland, I think, and the benefit of hindsight too, is as this has been recorded, we're just a few days removed from the AFLW Grand Final, which Brisbane had won. And I had the privilege of being a part of the team alongside Daniel Viles, Ash Williamson, Jess Maloof, Hannah Davies. I think that's who we've got who represented us here in Queensland. Of course, Rebecca Randazzo. I got to be a part of that team where we ended up calling Brisbane play all their home games. So that was quite a surreal experience. They beat Adelaide. They beat Melbourne. We were centre stage for that, so it was pretty cool. And a big shout out to our man, Harry, the media manager at Brisbane too. Congratulations to him and the team and all the wonderful work that he has done. But now it's back on to important things. And we're crossing over to you guys, your questions. So we've got 10 questions. I've had to trim it down. So we did get a few questions, but I thought I'd round it out to 10. Seems like a good round number, doesn't it? That's the beauty of going solo. You get to enjoy a coffee on your own, and away we go. Anyway, this one comes from Matt. Thanks, Matt, for sending this one through. And this is a very interesting one. What were some of the most challenging experiences, other than saying the word challenging? What is some of the most challenging experiences that you've had in broadcasting, and how did you work your way out of it? Okay. Yeah, I love this one because, as mentioned earlier, you've got to take the time to reflect on some of the awesome things that you've done. But let's be honest, it's the incredibly bad ones, bad experiences, which you also don't forget, but you find a way to get your way through the maze and learn your way through it. So here's some ones that I've had, some curly ones, and I'm very interested to hear from your feedback in the future about some of the bad ones that you've had. So the first one I'm going to look at, I'm going to cast the way back to the RDFNL, the Riddle District Football Netball League Grand Final. I can't remember if it was 2012 or 2011, going back way back then. When we talk about the phone line situation, bad internet, was a grand final over at Lancefield. It was Romsey and the Sunbury Kangaroos. I can't remember which one of they fought two classics back to back. I mean, there's been a few grand finals that I've had the privilege of calling since then. But we called the under 18s and reserves. And you think about the internet at the best of times when you've got so many people. Like if you've gone to a sporting event, we'll say MCG, even when you go to Suncorp Stadium, Accor Stadium, the big ones that hold 50,000 plus, and you're all jumping on your phones and your internet's going super slow. So you're trying to fight for that limited space. All right. So this particular grand final, we had the internet going. I think we were with a particular telco that everyone just happened to be on. We didn't get much traffic because the crowd wasn't as big during the under 18s and reserves. But come to seniors, we had problems, didn't we? We were fighting for the same space using our mixer, producing very, very minimal data compared to your average smartphone, particularly back then, more than a decade ago. So we were stuck in the same bit of highway, so to speak. It was chaos with the traffic. So we were getting dropouts galore. So what did we do for the first quarter of the senior grand final? There was 5 of us there while the great man, Gary, the magician Matthews on Highlands FM was trying to find a solution. I called the first quarter of the senior men's grand final off a mobile phone. And unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to bring many of the other teammates in because I was sitting on the fence, and you have to be a little bit impartial when it comes to calling, let's be honest. But I was sitting on the fence, and we were trying to find solutions to make sure that our internet could somehow get going. So I called the first quarter off a mobile phone, and then we struck gold. We were able to transfer to another network that wasn't as busy, and the final 3 quarters were able to bring the whole team in. So I think it was just one of those things where you had to roll with the flow. And so calling it off a mobile phone, just holding it up to my earpiece, well, actually probably flicking it upside down and talking to it very much like you're holding a microphone or drinking a beverage. Now, so how did I work my way out of it? Well, there was a perfect solution for that. Being on the mobile phone helped, and eventually we got through. Fast track probably 10 years later. And I'm the one that's somewhat the person in charge in the tech space, or at least from the panel operating space for SEN, because I was working a game for the NTFL, the Northern Territory Footy League, with Shannon Burns and the team up there, and they had a massive issue where they struggled with their capacity to get decent internet, which was impacting the ability for them to send data through their headsets into the mixer, through the internet, back to the mixer, back in the SEN studio, which I was in Brisbane at the time. And so we were getting massive dropouts. And this is probably fortunate in a sense too, because I was training an absolute superstar, a young star coming through on the desk. And we were told, when you work the NTFL, it's pretty cruisy. I gave him a wink and a nod because I'm like, we're in trouble here. So I had to take some time on the air. I had some ads to burn, thank heavens, because we had a bit of a pre-game. And so we worked our way through that. And eventually we conceded that we were going to get too many dropouts. So I said, all right, there's three of you broadcasters there. You've got a play-by-play, you've got a specials, and you've got another play-by-play. I said, what you do is I'm going to ring someone, and you guys are just going to pass the phone down the line. So play-by-play 1, passed it on to special comments, back to play-by-play 2, which essentially became the changeover. So for those who have been involved in doing dual play-by-plays with the specials in the middle, doesn't matter what sport it is, that's basically how we operated. We kept it simple. So when the specials went on, they passed the phone down the other end, and it basically just passed it up and down the line for full quarters, over 100 minutes of NTFL footy. And the quality was fine. You can hear things just fine. And you know what? We did not have to pull the pin because it took me back to that glory day. And the young superstar that I had with me, I gave him a wink and a nod. I said, we're right here. So that probably reinforces the benefit of getting a chance to do some volunteer stuff as well and learning some of the mistakes that may happen in the tech space, and then just maintaining your composure, learning that. And probably fortunate enough, I was able to take that in the commercial radio space and be that on the desk. And I guess the funny thing was, if you can call it that way, I spoke to some of the techs for SEN around the country, and they probably said, "Oh, we probably would have pulled the pin. And I said, I was so driven that we're not going to have a dropout on my watch. So we continued. So mobile phone, grand final, I had the chance to call it. Just feed that back down the line in a commercial space. So it's not an ideal situation, but you know what? If the quality sounds fine, you're not getting any dropouts, and the people back home or around the country can listen in, that's perfect. That's what more can we ask for? I've got a couple of other ones here. So thanks, Matt, for this question. And these ones will really help. So there was a couple of other RDFNL games. There was one where we had a storm that was brewing around Melton at the time. It was the day that Brendan Favola made his debut for Mountain South in the Ballarat Football Netball League. A very big day. That one, I went over there to Mountain South, watched that game, and then headed over to Arnold's Creek, and the storm just got too much. We couldn't get any signal, not a single thing. We couldn't even get phone signal, couldn't even get anyone in the studio. So we set up the marquee, and we just didn't have any luck. We gave ourselves plenty of time because you try and get there an hour before the game and try and work through your ins and outs and try and make sure everything's connected an hour before time, or maybe 45 minutes before you go to air, just in case there are any issues. We literally had to give up the ghost on that one. And fortunate, because at halftime there was a big storm that came through, and if we hadn't pulled the marquee would have ended up on the other ground, and we would have lost all the gear. So it was a dirty day at the office, but we pulled the pin even before we had to do a game. Before we got the game going. And then there was another one. There was a final out at Romsey, and we speak about weather. And for those who've been in Victoria in the testing season, out at Romsey Park, did the broadcast a semi-final, I think, between the under 18s and reserves. Under 18 and halves, I was with the great man Paul Turner. We were calling the game and holding the marquee, while hail was belting down right in front of us. And eventually the wind took a turn and it was just blowing straight at us. So we couldn't do it. We had to move to the other side of the ground where the barbecue was, where there's a bit of shelter. But even then, the hail was blowing in our direction. So we had to make a captain's call for the sake of our own safety with lots and lots of equipment. We decided had to pull the pin on that one, didn't get a chance to do the senior game. And we went straight into the club rooms and sat in front of the heater and tried to defrost after all the chaos earlier on. So there was two occasions which I actually had to pull the pin, probably more OH&S, but we tried everything, and every angle that we moved our table to, we were done. We were on a hide into nothing, so we had to pull the pin. Another one as well, and this is a very, very important one. So in answer to this question, what were some of the most challenging experiences you've had in broadcasting? How did you make it work? We had some tech issues in the 2023 qualifying final, the Q clash between the Gold Coast Suns and the Brisbane Lions over at Carrara, with the great man Kane Browning, who is making big waves up here, called his first ever QAFL Senior Men's Grand Final in 2023. We just called a humdinger of a final down at Broadbeach, and we saddled up and we went up to we went up to the stands, center wing over at Carrara, magnificent. And we were the big ones in town, the only media covering that one. And we had some issues with our audio where we basically missed much of the first quarter. Kane and I didn't really have any idea that we were in trouble until we had our main producer. We could hear him barreling down the phone going, "We haven't had audio all quarter." And Kane's looked at me, and I gave him a wink, and I just said, "Look, we're going to get back on at some point, so let's just call." And come the second quarter, things picked up. A great man, Fraser, was calling the shots that day. He was able to make some changes. There was some things that out of his control. And we lost a quarter. We didn't know until probably 5 minutes before quarter time. I think you have that instinct where you get a little bit frustrated, but you just roll with the punches, and you just have to. Because if there are audio issues, just keep going, because you know the tech team is working busily behind the scenes to make it happen. So you don't want to get caught out. If you know that there's a chance you're going to be back on, just call the game. If anything, for your own sake, just for practice. We didn't know when we went back on. We didn't know we went back on until halftime. But we were like, oh, when do we go back on? oh, at the start of the second quarter. Okay, cool. We could have called 2 quarters. We would have hadn't had any idea. So, and here's my other one. This is probably the most painful story I've ever experienced. I just bought a new phone over at Redlands Victoria Point, the QAFL. This is a big one, ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching, because this you might get tested in the future if something goes wrong. We're sitting in the commentary box. It was Palm Beach, Currumbin, Redland, Victoria Point. Spot might have been an elimination semi-final in the QAFL Senior Men's Football Competition for AFL Queensland. And I had my phone on the mixer box, and I said to our wonderful camera guy, "Look, I'll just turn this on. Won't be any dramas." Did not remember that my phone was on there, 3 stories up. I've gone to open I opened the case. The phone's crashed to the ground. This is the phone I've had for a week or 2, if that. I bought it outright, so I spent a few $100. And I'm like, oh no, there's my phone. And somebody handed it up, and it was cracked. It was done. It was cactus. The phone was obliterated, and I had to turn the microphone on straight away. And I was livid. In my mind, if you could see smoke coming out of your ears, that was it. I'm like, I've spent $250, $300 on this phone. I didn't have that money to spend. My phone that I've had for 2 weeks is just shattered. And I've just gone, so welcome back here to Victoria Point. And it's a great game here. And just, went on with the show. And I said, by the way, I've just smashed my phone. I'm not happy, but we've got a big game on here. So I had to park that. I had to really bench that, because at the end of the day, the show has to go on. And so you probably remember those things a little bit more. So I'm interested in hearing your experiences. If you're on the socials, please, drop me an email, playbypod@hotmail.com, or via any of the links that you can. I want to hear some of your horror stories. I'd love to share them in the future to see if you've had some shockers that we'd love to share, because those are the ones you don't forget, do you? Okay, this question comes from Jess. Best piece of advice given to you in the broadcast industry? Thanks, Jess. This is probably the golden nugget that I've shared with so many people since I learnt it. I think it was 2022, working with Wayne Suter in the VFL space. Wayne spent decades working in the 7 network and in the camera space and doing some wonderful things there, producing, and he knows how everything rolls. He knows what you can see. He knows what you can't see. So that piece of advice that he gave to me, which has just changed the way that I perceive broadcasting, was we can see on camera. And this is for a TV audience. So you might be working off 1 camera. You might be working off 2. You're going to get a close-up. You're going to get a wide, but the wide's not going to be wide enough to see everything. Okay? So you're watching, think about it next time you watch sport, particularly when you've got that dual cam set up. You get that really good close-up shot, and then you have that wide shot that captures just a little bit more. He said, well, we can see what we can see. Tell us what we can't see. So what I've learned to do now as a broadcaster, whether it's basketball, whether it's, it could be cricket, AFL, wherever it is that you've got space that you can look to the left or you can look to the right. If you know that you've got maybe a second where the ball is going to remain stationary, and you've watched a lot of sport, you know that the camera is going to be panned on that, whether it's a close-up or a wide, just use that second to spend 50 to 60 meters down the field. Get a look, and I'll refer to this to AFL, but I've seen it in basketball as well, because you want to look at where there's a bit of a transition happening. So you want to see if there's a 2-on-1, there's a 1-on-1, there's a loose player sitting in the hole, maybe a kick behind the play. So you want to be looking at some of that stuff. And you can gather that in 1 second. I've been able to predict great marks before they've happened. There was a game this year, so the game in 2023 in the VFL, and Mitch Cox from Williamstown in the VFL over at Springfield, he was able to take a mark. His teammate had the ball on center wing. I knew the camera was there, focused square on him, and I could see him running in the space, probably sort of 30 to 40 meters, taking that space. And so the ball went in the air, and I just watched him like a hawk. He soared to the heavens. I knew that he was going to take the mark because the space was there for him to do it. He ended up taking a real incredible mark, a specky. And it was one of the best plays I've seen this year. But just that 1 second. I gathered that in 1 second that he was 30 meters out, 30 to 40 in that spot. The play was 50 meters away from him, where the kicker was. And the ball went up that space. He took the mark. So use that time when the ball is moving, even from one end of the ground to the other. See if there's a couple of defenders that are filling holes, because that might dictate what you see on camera. It's a fine example. And I'll have to use the AFL example on this one here. So I do apologize, but it might even impact soccer, might even impact basketball. But if you've got the camera shot in front of you, you think of why the play, if a player's trying to go forward and then they stop and then they may have to concede ground. You want to know why. Quite often in that case there, if you're there live at the ground and you can see that happening, you make the comment, look, he or she, they can't go down the line, they can't go down the wing because there's 3 defenders against one of their teammates. So they have to adjust. And so when you're watching TV, that's just something that really comes to mind of like, why aren't they going down there? Is there a mismatch? Is the person in the ruck filling that hole that's going to make it too challenging? Is there no one forward of the ball? If you drop that in as your comment, even as a play-by-play, or even as a special comments, if you can quickly jump in and take that, that can make the team sound absolutely awesome. So that's the best piece of advice. I watched a bit of basketball recently, and that's something that I did when the ball was transitioning from one end of the court to the other. I'm sort of thinking in my mind going, well, they have to slow it down here because the other team have got they've defended really well. They've got a 3-2 set up underneath the basket, and there's only one of the attacking team's players in that space. So they've got to slow it down and they've got to do it. Or sometimes the ball moves really quickly and you know that it could be a 2-on-1 in your favor. So they're going to pass it around and maneuver the way around their one defender under the basket. So that even applies to basketball too. So take that in mind. We can see what we can see, but just use that second, use that half a second. Maybe you might have 2 seconds if somebody goes to ground. Look down the field, look down the court, see what's there, and paint the picture what's there too. So that's the best piece of advice I've given. And now sometimes when I go to sporting events, as I mentioned about the basketball, if I haven't got the cans on, I spend a lot more time watching what's happening in the forward half of the ground as opposed to what the defending team is doing the defending half of the ground, because I'm predicting, even in my mind, what might be happening. And these are the things I'd probably be saying if I had a pair of cans on my head. So there you go. Very valuable piece of advice there from Wayne, and everyone that I've spoken to since then about commentary that I've had the pleasure of giving some advice from. That's the first thing I say. So, okay, next question. This is from Chris. Thanks, Chris, for sending us through. Nice to meet another Chris in the broadcast space. Most unique experience in broadcasting. Well, this one stands out beautifully. It's a very, very special day. It was a CFA v Rest of the World AFL charity game over at Romsey Park. A lot of things happen at Romsey Park in Victoria. Lovely part of the world out there. I used to live near there for quite some time. That's Jake Lever country for those AFL fans. Also, the Prasparkas family. You think of the AFLW, Matty and Georgie Prasparkas. They spent their junior footy out at Romsey too. So again, lovely part of the world. So it was a bit of a celebrity day, and we had the great man Dipper. He was coaching. I think he was coaching the CFA, and we had this big stage set up, and we had Charlie Pickering, comedian, Tom Gleeson, a comedian, also a Romsey resident. I don't know if he still lives there, but I think he may do. Anyway, so we had Charlie Pickering and Tom Gleeson there, and we were calling the game. We had the speakers pumping out on the ground. We had one of the more entertaining umpires in the region, Mick Partridge. He was mic'd up, and so he had the earpieces in, so people all around the ground could hear the little banter that was going on. And for me, that was incredibly surreal. I was the play-by-play guy, and I had these guys on specials, and we were we hadn't spoke about what we were going to do. We did some casual introductions before we put the cans on and we went to work, and the three of us just made it happen. It was just incredible fun. And the thing that probably stands out to me about that day, other than we raised a lot of money for the CFA. We had a lot of fires in Victoria at the time. Is my very last job at the Midland Express. It might have been maybe 2 years later. Charlie Pickering was a guest at a fundraiser, the Gisborne Little Athletics Club. They just had a new track put in, I think, and I caught up with Charlie afterwards. I'm actually I can be quite shy, so I'm not going to go up to people who are, names and go, hey, I want to have a chat with you. You're so cool and I love all the work you do. I just said to Charlie, oh, look, you probably don't remember me, but we did some work together with that CFA gig a couple of years ago over at Romsey. And he goes, oh, I still think about that. And I love that. That was great. Oh, how could I forget? And then we spent about 5 minutes just chatting away and reminiscing. And this is Charlie, who's probably met 20,000 people in between our two meetings, and 2 years later he and I are standing there and we're reminiscing, and he's done a lot of gigs and he remembers that one. So yeah, I mean, that's the most unique experience in broadcasting. Well, for me that was pretty cool, because I mean it was for a great cause. It was a wonderful cause for the CFA, but they're able to catch up a couple of years later with someone who's been around just to show that it certainly impacted him. I don't know if anyone asked him. It's been a number of years now, but if anyone brings it up to him now, oh, do you remember that CFA game nearly 10 years ago? I don't think he would probably remember it. But anyway, this one comes from Jake. G'day, Jake. How do you manage to work with different broadcasters? Okay, I like this one because one of the things I've enjoyed throughout my broadcasting journey across different levels is I just love working with different people. But the first thing that if I'm the most experienced broadcaster on the card, and I can sort of probably help dictate on how it unfolds, is I like to put it in the lap of the new broadcaster that I'm working with, and it can be at any level as well, because I want to know what their strengths are. And I think at the end of the day, I guess my broadcasting, part of my broadcasting philosophy is that you're only as good as the team that you're calling with. So if you can build that rapport and find a few positive things that you can generate with your team, then they're going to be comfortable. You're going to be comfortable. They're going to be calling to the level that they're comfortable with, whether it be on specials or hosting or interviewing or play-by-play or whichever. But it encourages you to be very adaptable. And you recognize at the end of the day, you're still going to get your time. You're going to get your time on the mic to do the best that you can. And if you've got a hot game in front of you, doesn't matter what sport it is, I think that's wonderful. For probably some of the best experiences that I've had in calling in general has been from those that I've asked the question of, what would you like to do? And they've said, look, I've done a little bit of calling, but I've done a bit of coaching here in this space. And so I've got, well, look, do you feel comfortable doing specials? Because I want you, that's big strength. And I'm a big believer that your specials caller is your best caller on the day. Calling the game, yeah, that's fine. We can all say, Jack kicks to Mark or Sarah passes to Nancy, those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, if you've got a really good specials, then work to those strengths. So that's one of the things I love. One of the awesome experiences I've had to work this year. And she's now she's a premiership player in the AFLW in 2023. Something that I will never forget everywhere I go is that I had the pleasure of working a game with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. Oh, that'd be an interesting experience. Taylor Smith, who is now a premiership player with the Brisbane Lions in the AFLW. And I sort of sat with her and during one of the breaks, and I got in during the second quarter because I was coming back from a VFL game, so I was running a little bit late. And I just let her do her thing. And then we went to the halftime break, and I said, look, you've got the expertise. You've got the background. You play AFL football. If you do this, if you say what you think and predict what you think should be happening, then you'll make it, you'll get in your element. And I just dropped a couple of those points in there. And my goodness gracious, and I say this with hand on heart, I was so pumped that she just grew as a caller the longer the game went on. It was spectacular. I can't remember much about the game, to be fair, but that was an awesome experience working with Tay and just watching her grow as time went on. And then a big shout out to the main man, Jack Barry. Now, if you ever head up to Queensland, I know I've had a little bit of AFL experience, but Jack Barry is one of the most awesome people that you will ever meet in any sport. That's a given. And I had the pleasure of working on AFL Queensland QAFL Grand Final Day with Jack and Riley Guest in the essentially it was the Colts and the reserves, which is a big reason for this podcast, to be fair, and I make that well known too. Is Jack sort of spoke about, there's not many platforms out there that we can learn and grow as callers. So I'm like, well, okay, let's I'll get a podcast going, and I know Jack listens. So, and the words that I say are sincere, but we at the end of every quarter, even with he and Riley, we just broke it down. We interchanged roles from the different games. We changed up the dynamic. So I got Riley doing, I got him doing hosting / color, and then I mixed it up a little bit with Jack being on calling duties, and I just dropped some sort of casual tips in there, and to see that development happen is awesome, because it's super important to have a leader in there in that team, and it's super important to be very flexible and very adaptable. That's park your ego at the door. You're gonna get your time on the mic, and you're quite often the ones that just be the best that they can and keep their ego at the door, the ones that stand out and do the most, because they're producing quality. So make sure when you do get that time, even if you're working with someone that might be taking a little bit more, just make your time count and make it sound like absolute gold, because let's be honest, you've got the talent. It's just about being flexible and adaptable. And that goes back to the first question about some of the challenges. You just got to roll with it and don't let anything stop you, whether it's a technical issue or you might be working with someone that you don't quite gel. And that's the reality. You can't really gel with everyone. Some of the, when I was making my way through umpiring, is that I just loved working with people that I hadn't worked with before, but I also loved working with guys and girls that just wanted to take a little bit of leadership on the ground, because they've set the bar. And as a competitor, whether it be in any aspect of sport, you want to rise to that bar. So think of it that way. If you've got someone that is going to be a leader, the other team around you are going to be pushing up to that. So thanks for that one, Jake. That's really important. This one comes from Sam. Thanks, Sam. Most important moment in your broadcasting career. Okay, I sound like a broken record when I'm saying this, because I speak to this. I say this about to so many people. QAFLW, so women's AFL at local level. I was calling with Nathan and the great Daniel Viles, who was part of episode 1 of Play by Pod, and as this goes to air, it was his birthday yesterday. So happy birthday, Mr. Viles! You've many happy returns to be 21 all over again. It was over at UQ, so University of Queensland, lovely spot there by the Brisbane River. Dakota Davidson, who's just become an AFLW Premiership player, that's her club down there. And anyway, it was. I was probably pushing into the senior men's space. It was something that was in the works of happening. And so I was sort of transitioning out. And I think the most important thing for me, and we talk about putting egos at the door, but also looking for opportunities. And this is a key one, Sam, is that it was important that Nathan and Daniel, who were going to be working a lot together going forward, that they get the opportunity to bounce off each other as callers. And I decided just for one game, I wanted to park myself in specials. I hadn't done specials before. And to be fair, I spent a lot of time listening to specials, but I didn't really have that experience. So I was specials for a whole game. And this goes back, and it sort of premeditated eventually what happened. Best piece of advice given to me in the broadcast industry is looking what you can't see. So when I didn't have to play, when the boys were calling the game, I spent a lot of time looking around the grounds, looking for matchups, looking for little things that might be of interest. So when it's my time to come in, when there was a stoppage, I can come in and go, I could say X, Y, Z. And that changed the way I called forever, because as that year would unfold and as time would unfold over the coming years, I would end up having to call games on my own. So I'd have to be the play-by-play and the specials all in one hit. So most important moment, Sam, in my career was taking a step back and doing another role, another key role, which is specials. And I mentioned before, being specials, it's huge, dynamic, super important. So I did that. And when I was calling my own, it just encouraged me to be both, put on both hats, take one hat off and put another hat on, metaphorically speaking. And then when transitioning into the VFL space, when you've got two callers, well, essentially when you've got two callers, because you don't really get that in too many other sports, you've usually got, if you've got two callers there, you've usually got one color and one play-by-play. But when I've been calling in the VFL space, I've been very fortunate, and even in what I try to encourage is have two play-by-plays, but ultimately you work a changeover. One's specials, one's play-by-play, and then you switch over at a stoppage, etc. So I really encourage that. If you are a play-by-play person and you've got the opportunity, even for just one game, to be a color and just look at the game broadly. And for those who are listening on the podcast, I'm using my hands, expanding the hands to look outside the little box that you see when you are a play-by-play announcer, because you're only looking at that tiny little box. So being on color, you look to expand your horizons, expand your view, like you've got an ultra wide screen that's a wraparound, and you're picking out different things, and then you just come back in, out and back in. So, I mean, I start to feel like a bit of a yoga instructor doing that, but that's very much what it is. So there you go, Sam. Thanks for that question there. This one here from Hannah ties in with the above question. What other skills have you learned that have helped you with your broadcasting? Thanks, Hannah. This is a pretty simple one. Become the all-rounder. So learn everything there is to learn about match day. Whether it be roles when you've got the microphone on, learn about being the host, learn about doing interviews, learn about doing color, learn about doing play-by-play, and learn the audio side of things. I came from a radio background. My match day was very, very, very intense, if you can call it, from that sense. When I was doing radio for the Riddle District Football Netball League, I'd be umpiring the under-18s in the field. So you go and get your 10,000 steps, or you go and get your 4Ks or whatever you end up running across the day. And then what I would do is I'd go and set the as soon as I come out of the rooms, I'd use being in the rooms to just sort of relax and go, okay, I'll do the paperwork and I'll just chill out for a minute and just casually take my time getting out, because as soon as I walked out the change room doors, it was game time. So I would then go out, make sure everything was set up, and then all the gear, tested all the gear, run all the ads and everything like that. Did that everything remotely. So effectively, I learned how to become a producer and become the locker room leader, so to speak. So I just learned everything that you could possibly learn. So learn how to produce, learn how to tech when something goes wrong, do some troubleshooting while on the go, learn how to interview, and basically what happens from the moment you go live at the venue to the moment you go out at the venue. And I learned everything in between. Fast track to the time at SEN in 2023. I had the great pleasure of having a wonderful day. I actually called with another Hannah in the VFL. There's a few Hannahs around, so thanks. Great to see hopefully see a few more of you running around with the headset on. But I called with another Hannah in the VFL, one end of the ground, and then come around across the other side of the ground and did the technical setup for the SEN call and of that same game, and then ended up doing play-by-play with Brownie and Adrian Fletcher. And it was really good too, because coming from a tech background, we did have a few technical issues right in the lead up to that. So Brownie and Fletch kind of just spoke about how the call was going to go. I probably didn't really need to do that, because my focus was, okay, what do we have to do to get this on air? So that comes from being the all-rounder. As we had some issues, I've ran some OBs before. I was across the tech side of things. I understood the lingo, buttons to push, all that sort of stuff. Brownie had no idea, and that's cool. That's not his space to do so. And that's cool because you get stuck in a situation. Well, if you've got a few skills around, then you learn how to go about it. And even with SEN now, I had the pleasure of doing some producing, but that's because I've spent many broadcasts producing anyway, sort of looking at how things go and visualizing how things should go and painting the masterpiece. So there you go, Hannah, become the all-rounder. Another question here. We've got a few more to go. How important is the relationship with the tech team? Well, thanks, Mark, for that one there. It is paramount. They're going to be your best friends. Doesn't matter what level you're in, what sport you're in, become friends with your techs because they're the ones that are going to help you with this. They're going to help you anyway, but it is so important to help them because they're going to help you. And I found throughout my experiences, if you're in a position where you're doing a bit of tech stuff and you need to get on the phone, if you've learned a few things across the journey, that's going to be fantastic. But also that just keeps you versatile. So building relationships is such a key thing with your whole team. You got guys, you got your camera crew there. I feel every time I jump on the microphone and I'm calling with someone else or I'm working with a whole team, it's not just me on the cans. It's the whole team. I just have this tradition, this habit of announcing everyone that's a part of this because it is very much a team effort. It's as cliche as it is, it's very much a team effort. But the tech teams is crucial. Without the success of the techs, if things go wrong, like we had in the VFL qualifying final this year, and you turn around and you're getting angry at the techs, what's that going to do? You laugh about it afterwards. You're all in this together. So look after your techs, be friends with them, learn some things from them that you can, because you never know. Something may happen where you might have to step up, but that might also open up doors for you, because if you're learning a little bit about the tech space, and if you're in the broadcast space in the future, sometimes with a tech background can also be a backdoor into a calling background at a higher level. So that's some food for thought, but it is a team effort, and embrace what they do. And the highlights, I calling VFL footy this year, I loved watching the top 6 highlights every week. And if we had one or two that cropped in during the week, I knew exactly who was on that camera. And the very next week that I'd see them, I go, hey, we did a great job getting that nice little close-up shot of that big mark. And that made the highlights reel during the week. So you get pretty excited about that. You also like to listen to yourself too. Let's be honest. Got to be a little bit of self-indulgent. This one comes from Sarah. Challenges of broadcasting at venues and off-site. So this is going to be one that I will definitely be asking a few guests a bit more going forward in the future, because this is massive. The landscape of the broadcasting industry has changed in a dramatic way since COVID, where we're doing things more remotely and probably a lot of things off-site. I must admit, I'm preferable to broadcasting at the venue because I love the atmosphere. I love the thrill of going to the ground. I love the chance to get down to the fans, have a chat with the players, or even basketball. I just want to be a part of the action. I'm a sports fan. I'm a sports fan with a microphone on. So the thing that I thrive off the most is being at live sport, even if I haven't got the microphone on. I just love being there. And if you're around people, you've got the crowd there. I've been calling games where crowds are dead, and that's a reflection of the call. So yeah, the challenges there, the challenges of broadcasting at the venue. I don't know that I guess you can come across a couple of issues that are there. May even be getting to the ground, but sometimes broadcasting off-site, you've got the aircon in the room and everything's based there. It's very simple for the camera operator or operators at the venue that can take care of everything. Calling off-site's a little bit challenging because you've got to rely off the footage of what's happening off-site. So that's probably about knowing your game inside and out, knowing the two teams, knowing what they're like, being able to predict things on and off screen, just being able to pick a few things even when the camera pans across. So using your sharp eye to be able to detect something that might just add a little bit of something extra. So I know a lot of people. I know Jason Bennett, everyone I get on the podcast, the Play by Pod podcast, says Jason Bennett is the GOAT at the moment. He makes an effort to get to every game that he can live. but I know it's just not possible due to budgets and whatnot. So it's just ultra important to just be clearly observant about what's happening on the camera and watching highlights. Make sure you don't miss out on anything just off. You're only limited by what you've got on the camera in front of you. I've called a few games off there. I've called a VFL final off a dual camera, and yeah, if you know the game and you're confident in your ability, then you can handle it quite well. But me as a fan, I'd rather be there, but to be honest, I'd probably rather call than if I had the choice of being if I had the choice of calling and not being able to go there. I'd take call. I'd just be in the producer's box and see how we go. This one is from Tom. How do you find adapting different sports? That is a journey that I'm still trying to explore. When I was at Squash Australia, I brought my bubbly enthusiasm. There's a wonderful shot, kind of atmosphere or feel to the game, and I was stuck in the thunderbox. That had no heating. I had the fans underneath me just trying to generate some heat. We had 35 degrees and 90% humidity, and I think I must have, I'd go through a couple of days where I'd be calling sort of 15, 16 games a day from 10 o'clock till 8 o'clock or however it ended up being. But I would have people around and they would hear me getting enthusiastic. And that was against the grain of the squash culture calling way. I think I probably have plans to try and change that but at the end of the day, you've got to adapt to the calling style that is accepted from the top level and across all levels. So I think at the end of the day, the best thing to do is just watch. And I mean, it goes for adapting to different forms of media as well, whether you're calling off audio or calling when you've got a visual platform as well. So adapting different sports, probably the same as adapting different mediums. The best thing you can do is just constantly watch and listen. Listen probably being the most important word there to as much of it as you can before you put the cans on. So basketball's fine. There's a lot of things happening. Soccer, it's probably a little bit more slow pace, so you've got more time to dissect, and there's probably not as much happening. So that's where your stats sort of come in handy. So there, I do find it challenging, but I will admit that after working so hard in audio for a number of years, then learning to say less in painting the picture when it came to visual and then going back to that audio, I did find that a little bit tough, but you've just got to stick it out and constantly listen to. So AFLW this year was the first time I called audio for a number of years. And the thing that I would do is I would just, on the way home, if there was another game going, I would listen to that and learn how they sort of painted the picture and what they put in, what they took out. So, yeah, that's the thing. Do your homework. Do your homework on the players, but do your homework on the sport. I was calling with a super enthusiastic energy. You guys have heard, if you've watched the Australian Open tennis, they're not getting very excited going, oh, there's a wonderful forehand. And he goes to the back court and gets on his backhand, and they let the play do the talking. That's what squash was. I was going hammer and tong like I was describing everything, even though I really didn't know much about the sport at the time. So, yeah, that was a memorable experience for me. Maybe not for the best reason, but you know what? I learnt a lot more. And what I did is towards the end, I ended up getting a color on board and learned from them as well. And this is the last one. This is from Gav. Is commentary fatigue a real thing? Yes, Gav. Commentary fatigue is a real thing. It's, we talk about it all the time. Doesn't matter what sport it is. You get so excited when you start the opening game. You're all, all fired up. You've got this energy and you're really pumped. You're ready to go. And then if you're calling straight through to finals, you really do feel fatigue. You probably phone it in a little bit more because you can see the finishing line in sight. And it's not that you don't get excited enough. It's a big commitment. If you're calling a full season of any sport, that could be anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25 weeks. You could be doing 30, 40 games a year because you could be backing up over a Saturday, Sunday, or, if you've got games on the Easter break, or you could be doing a couple of games in a day. That does sort of tend to get to you. And when you see that the grand final or the final is in the insight, you sort of will that on to come on a little bit quicker. And it's a shame in some sense because it's the most exciting time to be a fan and to be involved, because as a club level or as a player level, you want to get to the main dance. But as a caller, it does take its toll. And I think I had a pretty hectic calling schedule in 2022. And unfortunately, and I really say unfortunately, but when the AFLW season kicked on into its first year postseason, this keeping in mind that I heavily watched, that's when we had the 2 seasons in 1 year, and I was heavily engaged in the AFLW at the start of the season. And when the AFLW season's finished, I went straight into VFL, straight into AFL, straight into AFL Queensland, everything that sort of came with that. Called the senior men's grand final for AFL Queensland, and it was around the period where AFLW started, and I was just done. I'd been calling pretty much every weekend without a break, I think for maybe 6 or 7 months, and I think that you put things into perspective. Like that's the reality. I've spoken to umpires this year, particularly in the AFL space. So apologies for those who are listening in, but I'm hoping you get some sort of understanding of where I'm sort of coming from, even when I deviate back to the AFL. But I spoke to some of the VFL umpires, and they were running preseason games in 2022 in January for AFLW, and they didn't stop running games until, well, if you've made it through to the grand final, they're running games through, goals, field, and boundaries from January 2022 to the end of November 2022. And then they have a 3-month break, maybe a 2-month break, because then a lot of them go into the VFL circuit. And then now they've gone on, they've got the longer seasons, because then a lot of them have been running around, some of them on grand final day in the AFLW this past week. They've been running games since February. So pre-season, what's the pre-season? You don't get time to do that pre-season. You need a little bit of off-season. So, but even then, the guys and girls are frequently running. So that's what it's like as a caller. You get excited for the games, but if you're calling from February through to November, or in this case, this year, particularly my calling schedule in 2023, I called my first game in March 25, and I finished in November. So that's 8 months, and I only missed 1 game all year. But saying that too, I was working a lot at SEN, so I was getting. I only missed 1 AFLW game because I was working the Sample Grand Final for SEN. So I didn't stop getting engaged in footy for a long time. So yeah, calling fatigue does become a thing. Now, speaking of things, if you are a fan of these things, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Play by Pod. We've just launched onto other platforms as well this week. We've just jumped on the Pocket Cast, so if you're on Pocket Cast, you can catch Play by Play on that. We've also got a Facebook page that I've slowly got to evolve. Got Instagram as well, so we've got a bit of that happening too. But as far as 2023 goes, we've still got a fair bit in the tank, fair bit of content that we're going through, and we've got some superstar guests lined up for 2024. So one of the key things that I want to stress about this podcast as well, and it's the advice that I've been given while podcasting, is to be able to provide content that can work timelessly. So in this particular podcast, I've made reference to the fact that Daniel Viles had a birthday just yesterday, and the AFLW Grand Final. But if you listen to this podcast 2 years down the track, which I hope you are, I'd love, maybe you've learned a couple of things. Maybe you've taught me a few things too. Don't want to really to be date-based. So we'll come back in 2024 with some superstar guests. But we've got some wonderful people jumping on board. And for starters, this show, however long it's gone for, I haven't put a clock on this, has all been thanks to you. So I do appreciate your company here on the latest edition of Play by Pod. It is the podcast that changes the game of sports broadcasting in Australia, as we look to take the headset off, metaphorically, and learn more about podcasting and broadcasting too, and expanding on our knowledge of broadcasting around the country, different sports. The 10 questions that I mentioned today, a lot of them will be able to resonate with you in the future. So the key takeaways that I will have from that, and I'm thinking about this on the fly, I don't actually have notes on this one, is number one, the show must go on. Number two, be versatile. Number three, if you can, learn about the tech background. Number four, you're only as good as the team that you're calling with. So back yourself in. Number five, park your ego at the door. And number six, fatigue does kick in. When we put the cans on, we automatically go to that place that you only know that you can go to. That only you know that your fellow broadcasters go to. And you get taken off on a journey that is just quite remarkable. But my name's Chris. It has been a pleasure being with you for this special edition of Play by Pod, built by you guys. And these questions that I'll be sharing with punters, sharing with special guests over the coming months and future podcasts ahead. Please, if you do have any more questions, chuck some links down in the socials or send us an email at playbypod@hotmail.com. Look forward to your company next time.